What's up, everybody? So today is going to be a different type of video. We're going to take a break from drifting, but we will resume that in a couple of weeks as we have a private day planned, and we're going to take out the FC finally for real this time. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The FC is going. I'm going to send it as hard as I can and give it a good takedown. That's basically it. So before that, I am going to work on the Taco, and because the Tacoma is called a Taco, I'm going to try to produce these videos, these next 2 or 3 videos on Tuesdays, and present them as Taco Tuesdays. So the first item up for repair is the entire front end. So as I stated, the front end. So I am going to be replacing the upper ball joints, the lower ball joints, and then the sway bar connector and bushings also. These 3 items. I think the suspension, the actual coilover and all that is good still, but I might just go ahead and get one, just to spruce it up here. I did give it a little bit of a bath, and one of these videos is going to include a complete restoration of the paint job, which is pretty sun faded. But what also is going to happen is brand new rotors. So, hey baby, I miss you. Anyway, brand new slotted and drilled rotors. We got brand new rotors drilled and slotted for the front, and new pads, and I put a new set of wheels on here that hopefully kind of complete everything all together. So I won't reveal which wheels I'm putting on there until I kind of get closer, but until then we'll kind of just work on the entire front end. Alright, so as you can see here, I have got the kit. So I didn't partner with eBay, but I specifically started using eBay because I would like to at one point. So if you can, comment eBay, tag them, whatever, do whatever you can if you want to, at least like and subscribe. Either way, I got the guaranteed fit protection on this rear wheel drive 97 Tacoma 8-piece kit. So it is the lower ball joints, it is the upper ball joints, and it is the steering joints. We also have new tie rods, new sway bar bushings and bolts, and it's 2 of them. Also have new brake pads that aren't in, they'll be here in the morning, and then new drilled and slotted rotors for the front. So, along with new wheels, new pads, the front end should feel amazing. And that's kind of what we're going to do. So, sit back and relax, and we're going to try something a little different this time. Okay. So, started out by just basically jacking up the truck. Later on, I learned that this is not the ideal way to do this particular job. The easiest way would be to put the jack stand on the side you're working on, and then using the ground to kind of keep the other side of the truck stable. But you'll see, and I'll kind of explain that later on. So just basically getting the first wheel off, and I haven't done this in a while, so I kind of had to figure out what's going on, what tools I'll need. As you can see, I just kind of fumbled through. I realized I needed the 1/2 inch to get the bolts out of the brake rotor. And just kind of looking around, I like I said, I hadn't done a brake job in a long time, so it took me a minute to kind of get back in the rhythm of things. And once I did, it was kind of like riding a bike. It's all brake calipers are typically the same. They're all attached the same way. They all usually have like the little floating rods with the threads at the end, or sometimes they have bolts all the way through them. But it's pretty much the same thing. So I take that off, and it was definitely time for new rotors, new pads, and many other things up front. So after I've removed the caliper and the pads, I removed the caliper bracket. So this was just another simple 2 bolts in the back. It was actually, they were all 17 millimeter. And then you kind of got to figure out a way to get the caliper out of the way. You don't really want to hang it off of the line. Sometimes they can break, sometimes you can support it. Here I had kind of thought that maybe I could get the rotor off, but it's not going to be possible, so I started working on the lower ball joint. And my theory behind this was that if I just removed all of the ball joints from the physical truck, then I could pull the entire assembly out and, you know, swap it all out. So that's what I did, and I kind of slowed it down a little bit so you could see. So that's what I did. And so I got everything attached, and then the last ball joint connection really fought me, so I had to use the little, I call it a tuning fork, but I know it's not that. But I had to use that, which destroys the boot typically, but since I'm replacing it all, it doesn't really matter. So I laid all the new stuff out from eBay and just kind of made sure it all looked the same, all the bolts worked. And as I was putting this in, I realized that this particular kit, although it is greased inside there, it does not have the top on it. So it gave you the option of a screw or the grease attachment for the grease guns. So I ended up putting the attachments on, and I had to go ahead and knock out the top one and start the reassembly process. So I went ahead and put the lower ball joint on, went ahead and put it on with the 1/2 inch just to make sure it was torqued right, and then I put the top ball joint on, and since the ball joint was on the top, I had to go ahead and seat it by hand. So after that, I got the whole assembly, putting it back together. You'll see later on that I've made a critical mistake here, but it's nothing safety-wise, and it's nothing that I didn't fix quite easily. So as I said, I was learning on this front one, so I didn't quite know that I could jack it up and kind of keep everything compressed. Here I'm working on the tie rod. It is a long and tedious process, but it happens and it works out great. And so after I got the top one in, here is my mistake. I left the caliper on the wrong side of this coil. So I had to take it all back apart and put it on the other side, and I vowed that I would not make this mistake again. Wink, wink. So anyway, and then once I put it all back together, I was able to put everything back together and tighten everything down. I was able to put the castle nuts on the bottom, on the tie rod end, and the lower ball joint. I still had a little trouble not realizing that I can compress it because of the way I jacked it up. But anyway, this is the sway bar connector. It is basically a long bolt with a bunch of bushings, but I was able to source a set of brand new ones, which is 2 of them, 1 for each side. And it goes together pretty easily. I did have to let off all of the tension to kind of get it all out. And then right here, I realized that I kind of had to situate the bushings, the rubber mounts, a little differently, as there's little indentions. Alright, what's up everybody? So, as you can tell, I've been having a lot of fun with the taco today, but I've made some good success and I've learned some things because, let's be real, I've never done this before. So, I took the whole front spindle off, which has like a little mini axle and an axle nut, and as you can see, I replaced all of the lower ball joints, upper ball joints, and the tie rod end. And I was going to change out the brake rotor, but it is going to be a lot easier for me to pull all the bearing packs out of the mini spindle and the current hub when I have it connected. So this is what I'm kind of talking about. So I've got to take the dust cover off, and then inside here is going to be an axle nut. Shouldn't be on there very tight. A bunch of grease, and then some bearings that are packed in there with a little seal that's pressed in. So I'm going to pop this off, but it was a lot easier to do it all once it's like said and done and back in the truck. So as you can see, I have got the new sway bar links in. I've got the new upper control arm in. I've got the new lower control arm in. And then I have got the new tie rod end. So this is just the driver's side, but I've learned a lot, and I'll know what I'll need to do on the next one. Like for one is put the other tire down so that I can compress this coil over. That was something that I had to learn kind of the hard way, and it took me an extra 30 minutes, but if I'm able just to compress that, all this stuff would have come in a lot easier. But yeah, everything went in pretty good. It looks great. It looks all brand new. And alright, so after kind of realizing I had to do a little more work, I went ahead and popped off the dust cover, and this was nasty. If you could only smell the smells that I was smelling up in this place, it was wild. So it was definitely time to change all this. The whole goal of this is to completely clean out all of the grease, at least as much as you can, and repack it with new grease. So as you can tell, that axle nut, even though it's not a true axle nut, it's on a mini spindle, that axle nut isn't on there very tight. And inside there is a washer that goes on a certain direction, and then a couple of bearing packs. So luckily for me, the pressed in bearing pack, which is right there on the outside, stayed in. Wasn't too aggressive with it, so only the internal and kind of, forgive my ignorance, but the one that kind of balances it on the axle, that one popped out, but I was able to clean it out thoroughly. It was kind of junky, nasty. So, after messing and tired of dealing with dirty hands, I went ahead and cleaned it up and went ahead and started the reassembly process. So, I did this all by hand just to get it started, and then was able to sync it up with the impact. And this is just pretty much a reverse process of what I did before. So, all of the grease that I unpacked, I went ahead and repacked. I repacked the bearing, I repacked the inside of the hub, and clearly I repacked the shaft. So, as we get that going back in, you kind of got to wiggle this little, the first set of bearings in there, and it makes sure that it's set centered on the hub, and then the locking washer only goes in one direction, and then there's the axle nut, and then there's the cover for the nut, which actually holds the pin in. So you put it all back together, you spin it around, make sure you don't have any crazy noises, and bam, look at that beauty. So back to the brake pads. We basically took everything off in this order, so we're putting it all back together. So we got to put on the caliper mount and the brake pad holders. When you're doing this, make sure you keep up with the clips, because that is a critical component. And now we put back the brand new Duralast $24.99 pads on this little taco. On the fancy drilled and slotted rotors. Here I'm just using a basic clamp, but I wanted to show you that you need to take the top off the reservoir when you're basically compressing the calipers, because you will obviously push out fluid. So that's kind of what I did there, and I just wanted to give you a little tidbit of it. As I use the wrench as a hammer to put in this, you can see that we're putting it all back together, and things are slowly starting to look like a truck front end again. So I have finally got the driver's side done. I did learn quite a bit from doing the driver's side, so the passenger side should take me about half the time. Honestly, maybe even less than that. What I did do is put the 18 by 11 with brand new all-season tires on it. This isn't really a good example because I have it all jacked up, but once I get the paint corrected, which here's a little sneak peek, I've already worked on that part, so this whole thing's going to be able to get buffed up, but that's going to be in a completely different video. I wanted to make sure it was running good, but it just looks so good. Drilled and slotted rotors, brand new brand new brake pads, drilled and slotted rotors, and then of course the 18's looking clean and fresh. Bam. And we're back onto the passenger side. So a few ugga-duggas with a few ugga-duggas and a couple of stuck lug nuts. I got this wheel off, which I'll be thankful to get rid of anyway. The steel wheels were kind of just meh. So it's kind of the same process, but I have a lot more knowledge. So I basically didn't jack up the driver's side, used it for the ground as leverage, and I raised this up to compress it and keep everything kind of together so I didn't fight and have so much tension. But it's the same process. You remove the caliper, and then you remove the caliper bracket. This originally was kind of a daunting task, but now I'm prepared to do it to this truck, to another truck, any other truck. I really enjoy working on kind of the older vehicles like this. There isn't a bunch of junk in the way. So these originally were 14mm nuts, and this one was a little tight going out, and it's also tight going in. Keep an eye on the caliper location. The exact same process, except this time I didn't have to stare at the grease points and figure out what to do. I just kind of went on a mission, made sure that everything lined up and still was good. A few more ugga-dugga-lugga-lugga-duggas on the impact wrench. I seat the top one. And we go down to the bottom and we do a few ugga-duggas and bam, it's ready to go. So as we get it back into place, like I said, I have a little more experience and I feel much more confident as I put this together. We put the endless tie rod back in. This one fought me a little bit, but I was able to put it in, no problem. I retained the nut on the same location, so I didn't have to mess with the alignment when I was done. Although we will get it aligned with the new wheels and tires. So just installing the castle nut and pin on the bottom of the tie rod, the outer tie rod, and adding the castle nut and pin to the lower ball joint. So like I said in previously, it was easier for me to compress the whole passenger side and get this in, but for some reason this was just tough. It was a really snug fit. I had to beat it with a hammer and many other things, and yeah, we finally got it in, and it was a struggle. It was a pretty good struggle. I had to cut out some bad words, and all that fun stuff. You could even hear them in this sped up version. So yes, but right there was the moment I realized I had to take the caliper off and struggle with this again. So I tried a different way, and I actually just unhooked the brake line, and it was much easier. After fighting with the camera a few times, I set it back up, set it on its way, and I was able to put the caliper line back into the caliper on the correct side of the hub. So I stuffed it away for a nice night, and I was able to pop this one off, and since I know the process, I went right ahead and started cleaning off all of the nasty grease. This side was a completely different color of grease. It was bright red, and it smelled just as bright. So I was able to kind of take it off and repeat the process as the driver's side. put on the new slotted and drilled brake rotors. Fight with this side for some reason. I fought to get that bearing in there, but it went in there. I was able to get the axle nut back on. It has a cover with a bunch of notches on it, and then the pin goes in and locks it into place. As long as it's free spinning, you pack the grease cap full of brand new grease and tippy tappy tippy 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 all the way back on. So once again, we're here at the caliper bracket. So it goes on with a little bit of a struggle, but it goes back in finally, and then we're able to do the same process, compress the brake caliper, and then the piston inside the caliper, and then slot it back on. This particular side, I had some trouble with the clips. I had to kind of rebend them and work them. I don't know if someone's worked on that side or not. The pads were definitely low, so who knows. Either way, it went back on. Got to play with it a little bit. Just a little bit of the twisty McTwisters, and we got it back together. So, clean up a little bit. I bring the wheel over. I try to test it, see if it'll go on backwards. Nope, it won't. So I put it on the correct way. And put it back together. Thankfully, everything worked out. So I got everything that I ordered for it installed. The passenger side was much easier than the driver side, just because I had experience with it. But I got everything back on, pumped the brakes, pulled it out of the garage. I'm about to go get something to eat because I have been working out here all day, but I wanted to show you guys. Bam. I went ahead and put all 4 of the Cosmos X 18x11s on it, and this is a portion with it that's actually got a good clear coat, so you'll be able to kind of see it. It's gonna look pretty good. I'm pretty excited for the next video, but like I said, I'm gonna end this one here. I am absolutely beat. Please like and subscribe, and thank you again for watching. This is part 1 of Taco Tuesdays. I will be doing more and more work on the little red taco and releasing them every Tuesday. So, like I said, I appreciate every one of you for sticking around, and hopefully if you ever get a Toyota truck, you can figure out how to do this. But until then, I'll see you around, and have a great day.